Whether you're new to the game or you've been playing for a while, there's always something new to learn with New Horizons. So I've decided to make a compilation of my videos going over common mistakes that players often make, new to the game or not. Let's take a look and see how many of these mistakes you might be making when playing. Leave a like on the video to support, and let's jump right into this. Starting us off, kicking out villagers. Now, just to be clear, I don't want to kick out any of my villagers, I love them, I'm just being mean to them for the purposes of this video, sorry B. A lot of players seem to assume that the best way of kicking villagers out is to be really mean to them, to hit them with nets and such and put them in pitfalls, but honestly, this really doesn't work. In fact, it seems like the meaner you are to them, the more they want to stick around. I believe it's more likely a villager will want to leave your island the higher friendship you have with them, so it's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect. It's like some weird form of reverse psychology in Animal Crossing. So yeah, you're definitely wasting your time hitting your villagers with nets and putting them in pitfalls and giving them bad gifts. It's definitely not making them want to leave your island any faster. Realistically, the quickest way would be to get an amiibo, invite them to the campsite, and use them to force out any village you want, but aside from that, you might just have to be patient. I can definitely understand why people would think though that being mean to your villagers would be the way to get rid of them. Moving on. So anytime that I've made a live stream where I've been touring viewers' islands, a comment that I get very often is people feel very down about their own islands as they tend to compare their island to others very often. And this is absolutely one of the biggest mistakes you can make in Animal Crossing New Horizons, comparing your island to other players. Whilst it can be good to do so in some ways to get ideas and inspiration and such, looking at other players' islands and thinking yours looks terrible is just not the way to go. Don't get me wrong though, I can completely understand these feelings. I think it's something that all of us had felt at some point when playing. But it's important to remember that everyone has a different experience with this game. Some people are incredibly into decorating and might spend all of their time doing it. Others might want to take it more slowly, or some might not want to decorate at all. You might want to do things a different way than you've seen anyone else doing. Regardless, your island is still unique, it's yours, it'll have something on it that only your island could have. I see so many people say their islands look terrible, but after the thousands I've visited over the years, I can honestly say that every island I've seen has been really unique and interesting. I often get people criticize my island and say it's too much of a maze and they find it confusing. But the thing is, it's my island, I play on it, it looks how I want it to, and that's the most important thing. Next, rushing through Animal Crossing New Horizons is another very common mistake, and I can definitely understand it because Animal Crossing is a very differently paced game compared to a lot of other Nintendo entries. But really, Animal Crossing is designed to be played at a slow pace, it's supposed to be super relaxing and chill. I definitely feel like some people can get caught up in rushing through all of the different goals, trying to unlock all the different buildings and maxing out their bells and nook miles and such, and whilst everyone is entitled to play the game however they want, I definitely think that sometimes it can be a good idea to take a step back and maybe take things a little bit slower. Ultimately, you'll know which type of gameplay is best for you at the end of the day, but I personally found there were plenty of times where I was really rushing through the content of this game, and then I got bored super quickly. The thing is, Nintendo never intended for people to rush through Animal Crossing New Horizons, but since when this game first came out we all had so much time on our hands, it made a lot of sense that we got through all of the content they had shared super fast. Nowadays, when I start up a new island, I really like to take my time with things. I don't want to lose that really great feeling that you get when you start up a new file. I also find that it just makes things a lot less overwhelming as well. Whilst it can be important to have some goals, maybe it's better to focus on one thing at a time rather than trying to do everything. Speaking of starting a new island, restarting can be a big mistake that a lot of players make. Now, I'm not saying that restarting is necessarily a bad idea. I've done it a lot myself and I've had so much fun with it, and I'm sure a lot of you will agree. But I do think it's fair to say that a lot of players have restarted and then ended up regretting it. Something that could be a good idea is maybe just flattening your island instead. I feel like that could be a neat way of, getting a fresh start on your island without losing all of your progress. And then if that doesn't feel like enough, maybe restarting would feel more worth it. I feel like a lot of people get really excited about the idea of restarting, do it, and then realize, oh dear, it's going to take me a long time to build everything up again, so I'm just going to kind of abandon the game. I've gotten so many comments from people who have been demotivated at the amount of work ahead of them when starting up a new island, so it's something I'd really only consider doing if I'm absolutely certain that I can't make things more enjoyable on my existing island. And flattening and creating a whole new theme and such could be a really great way of doing so. Another very easy mistake is letting your tools break. Now, of course, tools breaking is one of the major mechanics in Animal Crossing New Horizons, but there's a really clever way to avoid them ever breaking at all. If you've got customization kits and a DIY bench, you can simply customize some of the tools so that their usage will reset. This means even if one of your tools was really close to breaking, this will completely reset it and it'll be like brand new. Now sadly, not every tool in the game can be customized like this, only certain ones can. But for the ones that can, I feel like it's definitely worth resetting them. Whilst it's true that it's not too difficult to craft new tools or just buy them from Nook's Cranny, neither is customizing them in my opinion, and then you aren't having to spend even more of your resources, especially crafting materials which often I find myself running out of. This is also one of those things that I absolutely wish I had known sooner in Animal Crossing New Horizons, because then I probably wouldn't have gone through hundreds and hundreds of different tools, some of which I really wish I could have kept. How about a mistake that people make with the DLC? I would say one of the biggest misconceptions about the DLC is that a lot of people think it's just for designing, but it's actually not. I feel like if you're able to buy the DLC but you haven't because you feel like it's purely for designing villager homes and that's not really your kind of thing, that definitely could be a mistake, because you get some of the best unlocks in the entire game for this DLC, like the ability to design your villager homes on your own island, a shop from Wardell that gives you access to so many different types of items, shops to purchase unique items in, unique DIY recipes to collect. The list honestly goes on and on and on, so if you haven't got the Happy in Paradise DLC yet and you've really been thinking about it, then I definitely think you should try and get it. I've never once regretted it. And I feel like if I hadn't unlocked some of these really amazing features, that would have been a big mistake for my Animal Crossing island. Because the majority of them are going to impact your own island in some shape or form, not just the Happy in Paradise archipelago area. Now here's a mistake that I feel like a lot of new players make, and that is selling absolutely everything. Now, whilst it can be a good idea to try and get your mortgage paid off as soon as possible with Tom Nook, so you'll need a lot of bells and such, selling literally every item and material you come across could lead you to a lot of regret. Some things are much harder to obtain than others, and certain items can only really be obtained once without trading. I definitely do some research before selling certain things, and maybe trying to keep a copy of one of everything. I feel like that's a safe way of making sure that you don't sell something you'd regret. The same could be said for selling every fossil right away, or selling every bug and fish. You might regret that later on when you want to complete the museum and suddenly you can't find that critter at all anymore because it was actually quite rare and you didn't realize it. So yeah, definitely look up the things that you're selling before you're selling them. Or generally just try to keep a copy of one of everything that you find. I feel like that's a great way of doing things. Moving on, how about playing at different times? Now, I usually tend to play around 4 or 5 PM in the game. It's my favorite time of the day. I love the music. I just love the way things look. But you can miss out on so many things by not playing at different times and seasons and such. During nighttime alone, you'll find certain critters that you can only catch at this time, special characters you can only meet at night, and so much more. So if you have to, maybe even consider changing your time around a little bit so that you can make sure you play at different times so you don't miss everything. Understandably, a lot of people have to work or have to sleep early and such, so it'd be a shame if they missed out on certain things. Now, if you head into resident services, a mistake you might be making is not regularly checking the recycling box in there. You might have thought that the recycling box is just full of absolute junk that no one really wants, but this isn't necessarily true. You can actually find some items in here that you can't really find anywhere else, like the sloppy set of furniture. There can be some really cool finds in here that you absolutely would not have expected, so I always think it's a good idea to regularly check this out. After all, everything that you take from there is completely free, so really at the end of the day, there's no harm in doing so. Finally, one of the biggest mistakes you can make in the entire game is if you have Nintendo Switch Online and you have not made sure that your island backup is enabled. I believe by default this backup will not be enabled, so a lot of players haven't realized that they haven't actually gone and turned this on, then something bad has happened to their Switch and they've completely lost their island. So I would absolutely go and make sure that the island backup service is turned on and working properly. I personally would be absolutely devastated if I lost my island, so this is something that I've had to make sure was turned on. I know a lot of people don't have Nintendo Switch Online, so sadly there's no other way of backing your island up without it, I believe, in the game itself. But if you do have it, then this is absolutely one of the first things that you'll want to make sure you do. Kirsty McCallin says, people choosing the first island they see. Have a run around, get a feel for it, and if it's not right, restart the game. Don't settle. So I definitely learned this very recently. I've started a new live stream series where I'm doing a no terraforming island challenge, and it was really hard to find the perfect map that I wanted. A lot of the times I kind of felt like maybe I should have just settled for one that was almost good, but no, honestly, I really agree with this advice. I think a lot of people maybe settled with an island they didn't really like that much just because they were excited to play the game for the first time. Or maybe they just found the steps of restarting for new maps just to be too tedious. But I definitely think it is a mistake to settle with an island that you're not truly happy with, because this is literally the entire point of the game. You're going to be spending your whole time here. So yes, very solid advice. Don't settle for a map. Take some time, see if you like the map and the island that you're currently on, and if you do and it feels right, then that could be the one. Next, Fabienne says, gifting villagers random items / clothing and not being able to remove them unless you unlock this ability via Happy in Paradise. So yes, unfortunately, I've definitely made the mistake in the past of giving my villagers some really ugly outfits, and although Isabel I do believe lets you remove them, it takes a long time if they've accumulated a ton of different outfits over the years. My villagers have so many random outfits, and it's really difficult to get them to stop wearing it, honestly. I feel like the problem of having random items in their homes has kind of been solved by the Happy in Paradise DLC, unless you don't have that, of course, in which it's definitely something you should consider. But yes, I feel like it's a very common mistake people make. You'll see your villagers wearing just the most oddest fits you've ever seen in your life around the island, and it's not great, honestly. I wish there was an easier way just to completely reset them back to their default selves, something that I feel like a lot of people would like. Maybe it's a little bit of an odd feature, maybe it doesn't feel that realistic, but I don't know, a lot of things in Animal Crossing aren't that realistic, so I say Nintendo should add this in the next edition. Jada W says, starting to change the layout of their island before realizing they can't move the town hall. I remember seeing someone who made the entire area cliffs to try and make their island mountainous, then got mad when they couldn't move the plaza. Hindsight is 2020, but you should really check something like that before going through all that trouble. Definitely good advice. Certain things around your island just cannot be changed no matter how much progress you make at all. Most of the buildings can be moved, but resident services and the airport will be stuck there for good, so sadly you cannot change them. It's definitely a shame though. I think Nintendo should have let us do this. A Little Demon shared, when they choose their character's name, sometimes people don't like the name they choose anymore, but when you want to change your character's name, you have to restart your island, and when you finish your island you're proud of it, it's really hard to delete it. This is very true. Another feature that Nintendo 100% should have added for so many different reasons is the ability to change your name. I can't believe that they didn't let you do this. It would have not been a too difficult thing for them to add in my opinion, and it's something that would have been important to so many people. So they really should have given us the ability to change our name and also our island name as well. I'm really hoping this is something they will do in the next Animal Crossing game because it honestly feels like a pretty essential update to me. Corbin says, realizing they can't terraform the river mouths and they're just stuck with forever. So yes, it's a common misconception that you can terraform all of the rivers around your island. This is not 100% true. Whilst you can terraform almost everything, the mouths of the river where it meets the ocean you cannot change at all, just like you see my character attempting to do here on screen. It is absolutely not possible. So yes, this could definitely be a problem if you choose an island and the river mouths are in positions that make things quite awkward for you to decorate a certain way. Then you'd almost have to restart and choose something different if you wanted to. So when picking a new island, this is definitely a mistake to try and avoid because you are stuck with these river mouths, just like you're stuck with your name, your island name, and the position of some of the buildings around the island too. I really wish that Nintendo would have let us change this around a bit more. It would have been fantastic if they did. Thankfully, almost everything else can be terraformed in this game, which is absolutely fantastic. In past Animal Crossing games like Animal Crossing New Leaf, we genuinely didn't have the ability to do this at all, so it's really great that now we finally have more freedom to change our island in different ways that was never possible. I just wish we could change other things too, like these river mouths, because honestly, I do not love the position of mine. Mel says, forgetting they have turnips when time traveling. Yes, this is definitely a big problem that a lot of people don't realize, but if you happen to time travel too far forwards or you time travel backwards, then your turnips will rot and all of that progress and money will be completely wasted. This is actually a good way of getting ants, I believe, so that's pretty cool, but aside from that, it's not really a good thing to do. You will have wasted so much money if your turnips rot, and it's very easy to do. Honestly, there aren't many consequences for time traveling in Animal Crossing New Horizons. You can pretty much get away with it scot-free. But there is one major consequence, and that happens to be turnips. I definitely see why they did it this way, because if you just kept time traveling forward with your turnips, you could very easily make an absolutely huge profit. So this has pretty much always been a thing in every single Animal Crossing game, because don't get me wrong, Nintendo knows that people time travel, but they wanted to add a little roadblock just so you can't time travel and make too much money with it. I even put out some turnips just as a little decorative thing around my island to make a little stall for Daisy May, and yes, they still rotted, so sadly you can't really get away with putting your turnips anywhere. That even includes within your storage, so definitely keep that in mind. Lilac Moonshine says, letting a villager leave the island before you've got enough Nook Mile tickets to go villager hunting, and then ending up with an autofill for a villager you hate. This has happened to all of us, I'm convinced. We've all gotten that one villager who has autofilled a plot on our island that we absolutely despise, and it becomes so difficult to get rid of them after that because they've just moved in. Village hunting definitely has some of its roadblocks like this person mentions. You definitely have to make sure you've got enough tickets to find the villager you want, and you have to stay on that specific day usually, or someone could move in from the auto move-in queue. Honestly, another common mistake people make related to this is that they simply forget they had an empty plot open and don't take the opportunity to fill it with a villager they actually wanted to, then they end up with someone that they really didn't. So I definitely think this is something you should keep in mind in Animal Crossing New Horizons. You don't want to end up with a villager for ages that you really don't like, but it does pretty much happen to all of us, I'm sure. Amanda says, people who dreamy hunt for the first 3 villagers, but they don't come with their original house, so it's best waiting. So this is a very interesting observation that I'm willing to bet a lot of people don't know about. The first sort of 5 villagers on your island will have houses that really aren't as good as their regular ones, because they happen to be there when the island is still setting up. These 3 villagers, which will always be lazy, peppy, and normal, will never have homes that match their regular selves, so it's definitely a shame. These houses will have some of the items that you actually built for them as a part of the quest to get them onto your island. It's kind of a neat idea, but I don't like the fact that they deprive some of their regular homes, some of which are honestly designed so well. So this is definitely a mistake to keep in mind if you're starting up a new island. There's really no need to think too hard about these first 3 villagers that you're hunting for, because at the end of the day, their homes aren't going to be that nice. You could just move out whoever you do get in, and then get some better villagers that you really wanted later who have their proper homes. I'm not entirely sure if you can use the feature with Isabelle that resets their homes, maybe that is a possibility. And of course, you could use Happy Home Paradise as well to change the look of their home, which is a nice feature, but if you don't have the DLC, then this is definitely something that you should keep in mind. Christina Heber says, don't have a significant other or a child be the first player on your island. Now, this one kind of made me laugh honestly at first, but it is a very good point, and actually something that I've seen a lot of people warn against. If it is your Animal Crossing island, and you're not the main player on your island, there's a lot of things that you will not be able to do. And let's say you have a significant other who maybe, leaves your life, and then they're the one in charge of your island, you're gonna have to reset completely, so I definitely think that is something to keep in mind. As far as I'm aware, Animal Crossing New Horizons doesn't have any child controls either, so maybe if a young child is in control of the island, they could really mess things up for you without even realizing it potentially. So I think in a lot of cases, this is pretty good advice just to be the first player on your island so you do have the ultimate control over things. This will definitely help you having to avoid restarting later on if things don't go your way. Amitai's Film says, letting your flowers grow out of control. This is a video that I've actually made before on the channel, but I just want to briefly say that yes, flowers can definitely run wild on your island if you don't give them proper spaces to grow in and you just let them grow wild. You can end up with a huge flower problem where flowers will basically take over. Especially if it's a rainy time of the year, oh my gosh, you can just end up with so many flowers, and that is definitely a big problem that isn't easy to deal with. It's not like weeds where Leaf will take care of them for you. This is something unfortunately that you will get stuck with, and you'll have to dig up one by one yourself if you want to get rid of them. It definitely would have been cool if there was a service in-game to take up flowers. That's something that I would have liked to have seen a lot, but sadly that is not the case in Animal Crossing New Horizons, so we just have to deal with them ourselves. That I've seen shared a fair amount is that honestly, a lot of the time you don't need to cook. Instead, if you've got the upgraded Nook's Cranny, you can head in there and you can almost always find food being sold amongst the two little items. Now, the really cool thing about these little displays is the items you can buy from them are unlimited. They don't disappear like the bigger items in the store. That means that you can keep buying food from here to get an unlimited amount of food and energy as you do so. Of course, cooking requires you to know lots of different recipes, and it also requires you to have the materials to do so as well, like the food ingredients. Now, that's not to say don't cook, because honestly, I find the cooking feature in Animal Crossing really fun. I love doing it. But if you need to get a lot of energy and maybe you don't have a ton of ingredients or just a ton of time to cook all of the different recipes, buying the food from Nook's Cranny can be a really good way. This is especially useful for people who have a ton of bells and don't really know where to spend them at this point in the game. You may be doing lots of work on your island and need that energy, so it's good to head into Nook's Cranny and grab a dish rather than taking the time to cook them yourself sometimes. Now, group stretching is one of those interesting features where people seem to either love it or just can't be bothered to do it at all. If you're in the latter category, then I might have some good news for you. Now, a lot of people don't seem to have realized, judging by the comments I've seen, that you don't need to do anything in group stretching in order to get the rewards. Now, of course, you can get some pretty cool rewards from doing group stretching. For example, you can unlock some exclusive reactions that you can only get from this task. Not to mention, you'll also be mailed a bunch of different items related to group stretching as well, so it's definitely worth doing this feature, but I do understand that for some people it can feel a bit tedious and repetitive. So the good news is you don't need to do anything. If you're really lazy like me sometimes, you don't need to use the buttons, you don't need to use the motion controls. You can simply sit there idly and the game will still count it as you've taken part in the exercise. So this is a really lazy way of enjoying this feature, and I'm not saying once again that people shouldn't do group stretching. I think it'd be really fun. But if you're maybe feeling a little bit lazy, it could just be a good idea to just sit there and let it play so you can get those rewards, because you do need to do 50 days worth of stretches in order to get the reactions, which is no small number honestly. That can take a little while. It's important to remember that a lot of people have school and jobs, so they might not always have time to take part in group stretching, so this could be a simpler way of doing it. So this one could definitely be a very stressful mistake for a lot of people. Ordinances were introduced in the 2.0 update, and one of them is known as the Beautiful Ordinance. Now basically this will make your island thrive with flowers, it'll make weeds appear less, just in general it makes everything a lot greener. However, this might not necessarily be a good thing if your island is already cluttered with hundreds and hundreds of flowers. This is a problem that I'm sure many of you know very, very well in Animal Crossing New Horizons. The flowers spread like wildfire. When it rains, you have so many new flowers popping up, and it doesn't always mean you're going to get hybrids. So if you've got the ordinance added in, it might mean you're getting so many flowers that you just simply can't control them and your island becomes absolutely littered with them. That's why this ordinance might be a mistake for a lot of players who really don't want to go through the effort of having to dig up hundreds of flowers, because make no mistake, there's no simple way of getting rid of flowers on your island. It's not like the previous Animal Crossing games where you can just run them over and they'll die. You can't do it that way, you have to dig them up. So it's definitely worth noting that if you don't want to deal with this, maybe don't get the Beautiful Ordinance. Honestly, I think all of the other ordinances, especially the Bell Boom one, are much better than this one. I really don't like this in Animal Crossing New Horizons. I think it's a lot better in New Leaf, but hey, I do understand that some people might still find this useful. Maybe you've already got your flowers under control somehow, so this could definitely be useful in that case, but generally speaking, I feel like a lot of players have this issue with flowers, so it might be a good idea to not have this ordinance. So I haven't really seen anyone comment about this yet, but it is a mistake that I feel like a lot of people could be making, and a mistake that I've made myself many times. It's that you don't want to let your recycling box in resident services get too full. That's because since the 2.0 update, they actually introduced a bunch of new items which are exclusive. Now, if you have over 10 items in the box, there won't be a chance of a new item appearing in there. Every day when you have less than 10 items already inside, there is a 45% chance of an item appearing, but if you've got those 10 already in there, you won't see any new ones. It's also interesting that a maximum of 80 items can actually be stored in a recycling box, but you'll only see 60 of them. If the maximum is reached, so you get over 80, then the oldest items will be removed and disappear forever. So maybe if you've had a lot of items go to lost and found, you could potentially lose them forever and never get them back if you let it fill up too much, especially past that limit that you can't even see for yourself. I was honestly wondering why I wasn't getting any of the new items in the recycling box. I found it really strange that I wasn't able to find any, but it's because my recycling box is already so full up, so the game didn't want to spawn any of them in. I think this is a really odd way of doing it on Nintendo's part, but it's definitely a mistake that a lot of people could be making, especially completionists who do want to get these exclusive items and might not be sure why they aren't appearing in the recycling box. So we all know that there are two different sets of rewards that you can enjoy with Brewster in Animal Crossing New Horizons. The first is the Nook Mile achievement that you can get for visiting him and getting a coffee, and the other one are the rewards that you get for visiting him consecutively. However, it turns out there's actually a way that you can slightly mess up this neat little system. This is due to backwards time traveling, and as Astoration described, this means that backwards time travel will desynchronize the two counters. The two counters are, of course, the counting of the Nook Mile achievement and then how many days you've done for getting the rewards from Brewster. They mention that coffee obtained before backwards time travel in one day will not be counted for getting gifts. It says that, for example, if you stay on one day, get coffee, then time travel back to the start of the hour and repeat this 50 times, ending with one final backwards time travel, you will get the Brewster Nook Mile achievement, but none of the coffees that you bought will count towards you getting gifts. As you can see, I've managed to desynchronize my own counter, so even though I just got the reward for doing 40 visits to the roost, my counter shows that I've actually had coffee 42 times. I know this sounds very confusing and it's a super technical thing, but the gist of it is that backwards time travel will desynchronize these two different counters. A lot of people are probably using the Nook Mile achievement in order to see how close they are to getting a reward. It could be off if you're someone who time travels a lot, so it's definitely something to keep in mind. This next one is all about Kapp'n and his mystery islands, and the advice here is don't go hunting for rare Kapp'n islands if you haven't progressed very far in the game. As the datamine says, if the date that the rare island type has never happened since you created your character, as measured by current game time, you cannot go to that rare island and instead will roll for a normal island. Now, if you don't know what a rare island is for Kapp'n, these basically involve the different seasonal islands, such as the Cherry Blossom Island, the Spring Bamboo Island, the Summer Shells Island, you get it. As the example says here, if you created your character on the 16th of July in the Northern Hemisphere, since the date for the Seashell Island type is August 31st in the Northern Hemisphere, you cannot get sent to Seashell Islands unless your game time is after the 31st of August. This is definitely really useful to know, as I'm sure a lot of people have restarted their islands since the 2.0 version, or maybe have just started playing the game in general, and they may not have progressed enough to have unlocked all of these different types of islands that you can possibly see with Kapp'n. That means that you could waste a ton of Nook Miles hunting for them, trying to find them, and you simply can't do it. So this is another case of something that you shouldn't do until you've unlocked all of them. Now, in terms of keeping track of which ones you've unlocked, the game doesn't really show you this. This is something kind of hidden behind the scenes in the code of the game, so you'd have to keep track yourself. But just use the logic that was applied in the example and it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out. This next one is about Katrina, and as we all know, the 2.0 update introduced a new luck mechanic, and this of course involves bad luck as well. The don't here happens to be don't go to Katrina if you have less than 10,000 bells in your pocket for a total of 11,000 bells including her first consultation. This is because Katrina's bad luck purification will cost you 10,000 bells, and if you don't have the funds for it, the option for this will not appear at all. Sometimes getting bad luck in Animal Crossing can really affect your day. Bad fortunes can do things like make your tolls break faster, food will provide you less energy, you can trip, Certain islands will be locked, like the Gold Nookmao Island, and you'll only be sent to a normal Kapp'n Island with clay instead of gyroids as well. So although this is a more specific thing, and I realize a lot of players are always going to have more than 10,000 bells when they go to see Katrina, it's definitely something that could potentially happen, even if it's by mistake. You may not want to suffer through the bad luck, but unfortunately you'll have to if you don't have the funds, as the purification option will just not appear for you, and then bad things can definitely happen. Still though, sometimes the bad luck can actually be useful if you want to get certain achievements like breaking your tools, so I guess it really depends on what type of player you are and what you want out of the day in Animal Crossing New Horizons. So this last one is much more subjective, but it's something that I had to mention in this video. Wisp was updated in version 2.0 and improved drastically when it comes to his option of choosing something that you don't currently have. Now Wisp can basically pull you any item that you don't have cataloged, which is really fantastic. That basically means that any other option from Wisp would not be nearly as useful as this one. Therefore, my recommendation would be don't choose any other option than something you don't currently have, especially if you do want to complete your catalog. Wisp is one of those features that I feel like a lot of people honestly forgot about, but trust me, you should be talking to him and playing his little mini game if you want to catalog more items, since he will basically give you something you don't have every time, provided you haven't already cataloged every single item, and if you have, then wow, I guess you just don't need Wisp at all. Still, it's great to see him updated, and it's nice to know that he can really help you out now, and he's much more useful than he was previously. But what are your thoughts? Do you have any advice for other Animal Crossing players that you'd like to give down in the description? Maybe there are other things that I didn't touch upon in this video that should be shared around. It's important to remember that probably a lot of new players have joined us over the holiday season, so this advice could definitely be really useful. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like to support the content. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and turn on those channel notifications, and if you made it to the end, be sure to comment Bob's Gang down below.